You want to kick this off?
I think we should. So here we are 3 years later. This is really close. This is now, it's June 4th, I think. So it is within 20 days, because it was late May. So I'm just going to say within 20 days of the time that you reached out to me and said, I got this idea, this thing I want to do. And it wasn't like, I don't even remember, it would be disingenuous for me to say that Mike asked me if I would help or support or whatever. I think it was more taken for granted, like, this is what I want to do. It wasn't should I, it was I'm doing this. I thought it was super cool, and I was like, that's awesome, let me know how I can help, that we need this. And this was starting a nonprofit that was going to find a way overtly for the gun community to connect with mental health initiatives, like proactive suicide prevention and mental health initiatives specifically at the time, really targeted on this idea that we all knew, we've known for a long time, there are mental health issues behind a lot of the mass shootings, active killer, that kind of stuff. So it was like, okay, and you've told the story a million times, and there's no need to rehash it now, right? But you had a conversation that led you to challenge that in your own mind, like, yeah, why aren't we doing more? You looked around, lots of people were talking about suicide prevention, but what was really happening? And I think this is really an interesting part, because this is where I want to go with this. This is 3 years later, the birth of Wtta Talk America, and what's changed. The first what's changed, I think, is what have you found evolve in your approach to how the gun community can get more involved in what I refer to, I think the biggest part of Wtta Talk America is proactive mental health care inside the gun community, right? And you had some ideas about how that was going to look, I know, in May of 2019, and now here we are in June of 2021, and some of your original vision, I think you nailed it like 1,000%. Some of your original vision you decided to abandon, and then other things have come up along the way. So, Mike Sodini.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, to be honest, I was trying to take the lazy way out, and I just wanted to push money towards the mental health community and be like, we'll fund you. You help us find the next mass shooter, and you help us with suicide prevention. And then I remember having a meeting with you and the Vice President of Mental Health America, and you wanted to go to the safe storage route. Remember, I was more talking about outreach to kids and everything like that. There's all these things that I was thinking. And then, to find out that finding the next mass shooter is like finding a needle in a haystack was very frustrating. And also at one point, I think at SHOT Show when we had a board meeting, I was a little deflated coming out of that because a lot of the programs that I thought they were going to help us with, they weren't there. And you made a great point when you got up and walked off because you had to be somewhere, but you're like, anyone could just give money to the mental health community.
Yeah, probably.
Right. We need to figure out how, as the gun community, we can come forward and be proactive. So I think the biggest shift is literally being forced to look inside of our community and say, like, we can't give you legislation, we can't give you restriction, but there is valuable space we can give you to help those that are in crisis to, get that help that they need without fear of consequence, right? And I think just that in general has brought a lot of people from the outside the community to the community. And then there's the education piece. There's the classes. I mean, it evolved into what it is today. It's completely different. It's funny, I look back on like some of the shows, podcasts that people had me on, and I realized like there was nothing back then compared to now, right?
And that was frustrating for you, right? So like a little like behind the curtain, I guess, but this is kind of like how it works, right? And we talk about like Hold My Guns a lot, right? Hold My Guns has this program. They get a lot of traction. They should, because the Hold My Guns idea is great. But the Hold My Guns idea is hold my gun. Thanks, right? And they want to put a structure around it. And I understand why they think that's the better approach, but they've also had a really hard time getting started because they want every gun shop to sort of sign on to this program. And they can say there's gun shops all across the country. Well, the reason they have like something approaching 0 gun shops in their program is because they want it so structured. And some of the other, the Gun Safety Project, the Gun Shop Project, the Colorado outreaching, it's all just like, look, gun shop, will you hold people's guns if they come in and they say they're suicidal or they're thinking about it or they don't know and they just don't want the guns around? Yes, cool. You figure out how to do it. And that's sort of been an approach that we've evolved to, I think, on that side. And we talk about, take the important component of the gun, which then gets into some of the politics, right? Like we want to say we need private transfers, especially for certain situations, including I want to be able to give my gun to my brother. But if my brother isn't a gun guy, do I really want to give my gun to my brother, or do I just want to give him the bolt? And now the gun's useless to me, and he knows, hold my gun part. Mike DeSargo put up a thing last week, a picture with you and Jake, that was, hold my barrel, right? Because take the barrel out of the Glock, well, give you the barrel, my gun's useless, you don't have to worry about a gun in your house, storing it around your kids, any of that. There's no politics, there's no transfer, and that accomplishes the same goal to a large extent. But we didn't know that 3 years ago.
Right.
It's been a lot of the work and talk with mental health professionals about how can we help? What can we do? So while the when you went out and you reached out, and you've told this story a million times, where you reached out to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about contacting Mental Health America. And I was like, cool, but wait till we get the 501c3 paperwork back, and then it can be official, maybe a website. Yeah. You're like, okay, good, send. Right, and it worked out great, right? Like you made this amazing connection, but what were some of the things you learned? So yeah, there's always that. Like I learned they didn't have programs, but talk about some of the positive things, because I think you've become way more educated. I know I've become way more educated. Guys like Pirelli's book here, like books like this, Interactions with Mental Health America, the interactions I've had with Emmy Betts and people at the Affirm research and like that, the thing we've done with Larimer County. I mean, there's been a bunch of cool things. What are some of the highlights and takeaways that you now have more insight in terms of how to really help the gun community with mental health issues?
Well, I think the biggest thing is finding that we have allies on the so-called other side that have overlapping interests, right? We didn't know that those existed.
Right. Like they're all our enemy.
Right. They're all our enemy. You can't talk to them. And it's funny because there's things that we don't come out and talk about because we can't, but there is overlapping interests. So it's been fun to watch and kind of bring to light to some of the people that are on the mental health side of things to show that some of these laws, they're not safe, right? They could get somebody killed, or maybe they weren't looking at it from the standpoint of the underprivileged, underserved, right?
Huge.
Yeah, and so it's been opening their eyes to kind of, hey, this seems good in theory, but we can't have this because it adds to the stigma of mental health. And then watching them react and say, okay, well, we have to call this representative who's backing that bill and have a conversation.
Call it off.
Right.
Yeah. So that influence, you talk a lot, you've been talking a lot about that, I think the last couple of months even more, like this idea that, like, if people only knew why we I always say, I don't necessarily, I've always said it, but I've said for many years, and I've been saying more loudly recently, advocacy doesn't happen inside the gun community. Right, we don't, like, if you already are pro-gun, I'm like, Mike, you gotta be pro-gun, man.
Right, it's an echo chamber, right?
Okay, great. But I can shame, I can be like, look, man, if you're not more pro-gun, we could lose our gun rights. You're like, okay, I'll be more pro-gun. What does that mean? Usually what that means, the person that's doing that inside our community means give my organization money. I need to build my war chest so I can fight the gun laws. So I'm going to fearmonger you, and I'm going to shame you, and you got to be more pro-gun by supporting me, right? Or supporting a bunch of organizations. And I've been guilty of that too, saying, give the money to these good organizations, right? Find the organization in your state, and that's important, but it's not all there is. And especially I've become more jaded towards the people that are just doing that. They're not really out there doing advocacy to change minds. They're sort of demonizing everybody and saying, yeah, they want to take away our guns, so you give me money, and then I will fight them in court. Well, how about we just change their minds, right? And then we don't have to worry about fighting them in court, and maybe you won't have that nice car that the organization funds you with, but we don't need your organization because we're not fighting in court all the time. Where your overt message of, if you people even knew what we're doing in the background, where was that? Was that even on your radar that you could have that impact 3 years ago?
It's funny, looking back on it now, probably not, but I've always, the way that I've held, my life together, like just from kid, being from the family that I'm from, I've always been able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And I always knew that you never could get what you wanted if you told them, go to hell.
Right.
Yeah,
it's not going to be super persuasive.
And I
think that's on Pirelli's book, page 7.
Right?
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. But I guess the thing is like there's this. They make it seem like if you sit down with somebody who's anti-gun and have a conversation, right? And it doesn't mean like when you do that you're automatically saying, okay, I'm going to give up my rights or I'm going to concede. That they touch you or something, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
You start to turn anti-gun.
Like that, like the bad Spider-Man
right.
alien.
But
It's not like that.
But it never goes the other way. Like, wait, what if Mike sits down with these people and he changes their mind? Like, no one ever.
Because if you fearmonger like they and you dehumanize the other side, it's like, well, how could you change your minds? They're libtards or whatever. And obviously, like, people watching the WTA podcast probably are familiar with the whole like Dan Gross thing. Like, here's the former president of Brady that I bring to Washington, D.C. to stand on the same stage as 30 other gun rights advocates, who throws a bunch of like his past under a bus to call out the people that are disingenuous in the gun control side that say, well, we respect your rights, but they don't. And he's saying, I learned, I quit. There's a reason I'm the former president of Brady. How is this not a huge win for the gun community, right? But it's like, well, wait, if we admit they can change, then we don't need a big bunch of money to fight them forever. And we don't need to fearmonger that the sky is falling, because maybe it's just about a conversation over a couple drinks. You know, or maybe it's about bringing somebody to the range and letting them spend 2 days with like the people up at Gun Owners Action League that Dan Gross did. Let them spend a couple days on the range, in the range, shooting guns around real gun owners, preparing for personal defense, and maybe a light bulb will go off. And that's just how easy it is, though, really.
Right. The light bulb went off a couple weeks ago when Jake and I went to Reno and filmed with Connie Ray from.
That's been an amazing series.
Yeah. So I mean, I've seen it. You know, the thing is the interesting part, because you took a lot of heat for the whole Dan Gross thing, but I mean, I'm sitting here on the front lines in Nevada, and we're working to change the language in the red flag laws. I mean, we'd work to get rid of them, right?
Sure.
But they're there already.
Right.
So what do you do now? You can't say no red flag law because
back in the corner and be like, I hate red flag laws.
Yeah, we all hate them.
Give me some money.
Right. But now we're working to change the language, right? Because that's what we can do now,
right.
And that's on something that's here. You know, they're coming after you for something that's already here in most states that we got to combat now. And if we don't sit down and have the conversation, or at least try to explain our side, and bring in the people that have the most juice right now, which is, I'd say, like your Kevin Dixies, right? Your Ken Scotts, your Maj Tories, your Liberal Gun Club,
Liberal gun owners,
right? Armed equality. Bring the voices, right, that can relate to the people that are in power now.
Right, and this is because it's not like a racial thing. It's just an ethos thing, right? Here are people that are fighting for civil rights, and people are looking to bend over backwards to be fair to and be open to, right? Any kind of different lifestyle, any minority status. Well, okay, so there's a bunch of people out there who are super like liberty, freedom, individual rights, civil rights. This is Argo J shirt, right? Like the resources we have and the influence we have in our community. But a lot of people will tell you, Kevin Dixie just had his train and learn event. One of the best I've been to. I averaged 5 or 6 conferences a year that weren't my own and weren't. Now I'm not talking about NRA or NSSF, but like small conferences, 50 to 150 people. I used to do 5, 6, 7 of those a year for like a decade straight. Not always the same ones every year. And I probably touched all of the major ones in the training community over the last 20 years that have happened, right? Either as a student or often teaching and participating behind the scenes, seeing it. Kevin Dixie just ran one of the best events I've been to. Kind of every cross-section of the community in a lot of ways, thought diversity included, which I think is the biggest thing we need in our community is respect for thought diversity. I don't know anybody there who doesn't respect what Walk Talk America is doing or understand the importance of mental health. And he had you speak at the event.
Right.
So you're influencing those people. Now, you've been in this community for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? One way through the family.
Yeah, by one way or another.
Least, right? Worked in the community. When was your first SHOT Show?
My first SHOT Show was 1997.
So that was my first year. I didn't know that we had the same first year.
Yeah, I wasn't with the company then. I was in college, but I went to the SHOT Show to help out of the booth.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's awesome. So I didn't realize that. So last year, if 2021 hadn't been canceled, it would have been our 25th year in the industry. I always consider my first SHOT Show the first year I worked in the industry, right? So 25 years in the industry, how influential were you personally, Mike Sodini, in the gun community in 2018, up to 2018? Like scale of 1 to 10, if you put...
Like, 1.
Okay. So like pick whoever, right? Pick right. Wayne LaPierre.
Right, Wayne LaPierre's a 10.
Or whatever.
And then a janitor at the SHOT Show. I'm right there tied with him.
All right, so now, like, like humble brag, like all that, put all that stuff aside. Like honestly, like how much has that changed?
Oh, it's changed tremendously. I mean,
Right.
I can't. I'm very confident in what Walk the Talk America does. There's not a room that I don't feel welcome in, or if I go into it, I feel like we're gonna get that gold. We're gonna win, right? We're gonna win people over. We're gonna change people's minds. We're gonna educate them. And so now I would say it's between 7 and 10.
Right.
You
Like
know?
it's huge, the influence you have, right? And
Yeah.
Walk Talk America and you personally, right? So, super congrats. That to me is one of the most significant changes that's occurred in the last 3 years is just the impact that Walk Talk America has had and the confidence with which you talk to other people in the gun community. I mean, I remember you the first time you spoke publicly. I don't remember, like, first time you spoke publicly about Walk Talk America, an event was at the Guns for Everyone. Oh, I was wearing that shirt earlier. Edgar had that event, and Maj was out there. You know, I spoke. A couple other people were out there. You found out you were speaking approximately 4 minutes before.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Because I was ready to speak, right? But you came into town. I'm like, why would I speak on it when you're the founder guy? So I don't even know if, kind of the way I remember it, like I just got like, hey, come listen to me speak, and my speech was your introduction. Like it really wasn't a lot of warning, and then but some really, I think, impactful things happened right then,
Right.
that let you know this was the right path.
Right, and that was the hugs and the tears, right?
Yeah,
I mean, just from after, and once again, that's a perfect example of me going up and talking for 20 minutes to a crowd with really, thank God someone didn't say, what do you actually do? Like I need
Okay,
to.
well, I'm gonna get to that.
But yeah, so kind of just bringing that to light amongst gun people, I saw that there was like a weight lifted off of their shoulders.
Telling them that
Right, the guy who owns the gun company,
Right.
that we need to be able to come forward and talk about mental health.
this is okay. It's almost
Right.
just like permission to talk about it.
Right,
Right.
and
This
what-
was before that book existed. Before
Right.
the National Suicide Prevention. I just saw some of that stuff around here from NSSF. Right. The Talk Saves Lives. So you have some of that stuff around here.
Yeah.
Like these initiatives have been out there, but not in the same way. That and this is a great initiative and great material as NSSF does, but the way that WTTA does it and the way you do it especially is different. Right now, if you were going to list like WTTA programs or initiatives, what do we have?
The biggest ones are the mental health flyers for the trainers,
Okay.
the gun manufacturers, the
information
accessories,
cards.
the information cards that goes all the way to the gun stores.
Make that one thing. The information
Right, the
cards.
information
where people can
cards.
say, here.
That leads to the free and anonymous mental health screenings.
Mental health screenings
Right.
online. That's huge.
Then I would say that our course for the mental health clinicians,
The
which,
cultural competency course for mental health practitioners, mental health professionals.
right, which the second one's right around the corner, by the way, just
Right.
plugging that. And then I'm going to throw something in there, but our work with the safe companies and
Yep.
the programs like
Cause of Pause.
Cause of Pause.
I think is huge and simple. Right.
Right.
I'm really proud of that.
And just the fact that the technology that we've been talking about for years has now been put in motion with
Right.
with
So then that's the product development consultancy where we're helping safe companies understand why someone should be able to willingly lock themselves out of their guns. Like if I want to lock the safe and for 72 hours, for 30 days, whatever it is, I should be able to lock myself out of my safe and have that control. Because now there's no stigma, now there's no judgment, now there's no shame, now there's nothing. It's just, I'm going to lock the gun because I'm going to take that step. So I think even if it's just those five, and I know there's other things, but those are five major legit things. In August of 2000, I keep saying 2018 or 19.
2018.
It was 18, right? Yeah. So 2018, August 2018, when you got up to speak about it, how many of those programs existed?
0.
Something approaching 0. And this really bothered you, right? And I'm like, the whole point is just go up to, it's okay to talk about mental health, and we need to be proactive, right? And I was really adamant about this idea that the key is going to be focusing on suicide prevention because it was already normalized, right? Like we already had major industry people saying, yeah, we need to talk about the suicide prevention. And that statistic that we all know, over 60% in any given year of the firearms involved deaths are suicides. So right away, when anti-gun Karen comes out and says, hey, 37,000 people died last year, that's too many, we need to do something. Okay, well, we could wipe 24,000 of them out really quick if we could end firearms involved suicide. Let's focus on that.
Right.
And mass shooters, by the way, is like point, whatever. It's like maybe 1 or 2% in a year. And firearms negligence is 2 or 3%. So it's always, it's never going to be the mass shooter, even though that gets the headlines. But here's the magic trick. And this, I think, is something that I will say I had confirmed early on in this adventure. But I think you remember we talked about this really early. Like, if you take the warning indicators that you might look for and screen for, if you were going to be screening like teenagers, for example, who's going to be the next mass shooter, and you were also going to do screening for who could be potentially suicidal, particularly if they suicidal with a firearm because they have access to firearms, there's going to be about a 99% overlap. Now, there's 1 out of 20 million is the spree killer, and 3 out of 100,000 might be the death by firearm, self-inflicted death by firearm. So that's a bigger number. And if we screen for that, we're going to catch these people 99% of the time. And if we can stop them from being potentially suicidal with a firearm, we might also intervene with mass shootings. And that sales pitch has been hard to make, right? Because people still just want, but what about mass shooters? And it's like, look, you go ask anybody. There is an approach. We could throw $20 million into the school system tomorrow from the gun community and say, try to stop the next mass shooter. It's going to come out looking like a anti-depression, anti-suicide.
Right.
That's what it's going to look like. And why not do that? It would not be a net positive, right? So I think that took some time to work through.
Yeah, it took some time. Because once again, it's a lazy way. You want the answer, everything like that. But I think, I always say it's casting the wide net and catching somebody in early, right?
Yep.
And that's really what it is. I mean, you think about some of the mass shootings that have happened lately, they were mass shootings and ended with suicide.
As many do.
Right. As many of them do. That's right. Very few people go out on their sword, you know what I mean? But, I think that goes back to the whole thing, like, hey, look, let's just don't let anyone tell us we can't be socially conscious. We can't be a socially conscious 2A. We can't address these things. Once again, we don't ever have to give up rights. We don't. We could still die on that hill, but we can allow usage of our space, right? We can make the connections to people. We can educate everyone that's on the so-called other side of the mental health thing. They educate us, right? When they educate us, we could come up with these ideas.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so the whole cause of pause, right? The cause of pause is this idea that so many of the firearms involved suicides are what we would call impulsive, right? Even if you write a note, it doesn't mean it wasn't impulsive, right? So writing the note, scratching it out and then grabbing the gun. But if you go to, you've got your daughters, right? So you go to grab the gun and you've got, oh yeah, I'm the mental health gun guy and I love these gals and I want to see them live their lives. I'm gonna rip that note up. Or maybe I'll save it for tomorrow, And then even in the moment, the cause of pause is, and the phone rings during the pause, right? Even if you disassemble your guns in that time of crisis. Well, if you have to put the gun back together and your favorite song comes on the radio, a bird, I don't care, anything. So hearing this over and over and over again from mental health professionals and from people who went through a suicidal attempt, and then 10 years later, they're telling the story about how they jumped off the bridge, and the minute they jumped off the bridge, they felt like ridiculous. Like, why did I do that? And then they wake up in the hospital and they're like, I'm never doing that again. So we know that these things in the vast majority of situations are temporary, that things get better, that there is help, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And if you're wearing the gun on your hip when you know that you're in this condition, it's just too easy, right? So the whole cause of pause thing is empowered by what we've learned from mental health. It's not just maybe it'll work. We know this is a proven intervention technique.
Yeah.
Cause of pause.
And the greatest part about doing these type of things, coming up with these ideas and having them be ours. And when I say ours, it's the gun community, right? It's the gun industry and the community and the influencers and everybody that's involved. But I feel like a lot of the divide is because simply we just sat back and we didn't make any initiatives, right? And now when I have these meetings and I'm talking with people from, I had a lady who runs a couple organizations from San Jose State the other day call and talk about having me come up there in a few months to talk to some people, some of the people in their organization. And the thing is she was blown away on the conversation because someone said, you need to call this guy Mike Sodini from Wtta America because they're doing some pretty neat stuff, right? And she admitted it. She's like, I always assumed that nobody did anything.
Right, of course.
And
because for a long time we denied, like, oh, it's not our responsibility, right, or whatever. Like, it's mental health's fault, and then that goes back to the origin story, right, which is like, oh, it's those people, the mental health people need to figure it out. And unfortunately, that's a Wayne LaPierre speech, right? The real problem is mental health. It's not guns. Leave guns alone. Okay, but hey, Wayne, if 20,000 of us a year are killing ourselves with our own guns, and if another 5,000 to 10,000 of our family members are getting access to our guns and killing themselves, that's our problem, and that's something that Walk Talk America has confronted head on. How much do you worry about those who would say, hey, if you talk about these problems and you admit that gun owners could do something about it, then it becomes like political fodder for somebody to say, we need to tell the gun owners to lock their guns up, or tell their gun owners to store things separately, or whatever.
I don't worry about it at all, because usually when once again, there's no nuanced conversations going on social media,
right?
Right.
Very few.
Those are the things that I said. Like, I can't just sit there and film these conversations and post them. But usually, what happens is when you're in a situation and no one's peacocking for anybody else, and you're having these conversations, it becomes one of those things where it's like, well, let me ask you why. Right. And then if you have your answer ready and you're prepared, most people see, okay, I see how that's a problem. And that's what I love too. Like, let me just throw this in there. When these things happen now, they call me.
Right.
Like Debbie calls me. Like all these people from these organizations call me. And sometimes they need to be reminded. Remind me again about the AR thing. Like, I want that though, right?
Absolutely. Call us.
Right.
Don't call somebody at the local gun shop who's going to say, ARs, liberty, cold dead hands.
Right.
Shall not be infringed.
Or don't call somebody who's going to literally be like, we need to get rid of them all, right?
Like, or the other side, which is way more easy. I mean, like, I've been having conversations with a major research center that is literally funded by one of the best known anti-gun names in the country, right? They put something dumb out on Twitter that was horribly worded, and turns out now, because of these conversations I have a mutual friend, right? And she said, hey, seriously, this guy that just criticized you on Twitter, he's legit. He's not just a troll. He's not like a, gun nut or whatever. He's, I think I'm kind of a gun nut, but, in her mind, because I've had reasonable conversations with her, a lot of them relative to Walk the Talk, she's like, hey, tells the guy, the director of the research center, to reach out. I've had 3 amazing conversations that he keeps adding more members to his team, to the Zoom calls, and I know it's had impact and influence in the way they're doing things, and repeatedly they've said, well, no one talks to us. The only people that talk to us are the anti-gun people. So when we try to find out how to talk about, if they're saying, we try to find out how to talk about assault weapons, like the NRA won't answer our calls, and we have these 3 organizations that tell us this, this, and this, so we go with what they say. Okay, I get that. Now you have a resource, right? And then I introduce them to a couple other people. Now you have 3 or 4 resources. Don't just take my word for it. But that again is an outgrowth of Walk Talk America. And Walk Talk America has given a lot of people in the gun community legitimacy, right? Even people that aren't on the board or involved have been like, hey, are you aware of this? Like, how can you tell us we're not doing anything as a community? Look just at this one organization that you've never heard of. And they look at your website, they look at you speaking, they look at us, they call, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I stand corrected. And that again comes back to the conversation and the evolution. I just thought it was important to celebrate, the 3-year anniversary, really to talk about evolution and change, because that is the one thing that is most frustrating to me in the gun community, is this inability to accept evolution and change. As a trainer, people say I'm controversial or whatever in general in the gun community, but I showed up in the 90s saying, hey, you standing sideways and bending one elbow and training to double tap is stupid. It doesn't look like fighting with a gun, and I don't care if you were in the NOM, and I don't care how many gunfights you were in as a cop, and I don't care that you were a cop for 20 years and you've been teaching guns for 20 years. That's stupid. Change my mind, right? And it turns out in 2021, it was stupid to be doing that. But in 1985 and in 1995, for some people, they didn't know any better than Weaver stances, bladed stances, and double taps. Completely incongruent with everything we saw on dash cameras, and I just happened to show up at the right time with simunitions and dash camera videos and be irreverent enough to say that's stupid. So sometimes when I say that's stupid, it plays out, but I said that long before social media was around, so people were just like, oh, I don't know, I guess, Rob's one of those guys, or Rob's on somebody else's coattails, or Rob does this. you get that now. It's funny watching people with some of the other people that are in now throwing mental health as part of their spiel. I hear that coming back to Walk Talk America, like, oh, Walk Talk America is doing this thing like over here, and it's like, I know the origin story. Like, I know where you started. I know where this came from, and there is no more pure, like babe in the woods kind of like, doughy-eyed naivete, like optimism, the energy that you came in with. And when you said you were deflated, during that period of time where it was like the realization that this wasn't going to be just about taking money from 20 gun manufacturers and giving it to some organization in mental health world that was going to help us and being able to feel like we did a good deed. Like, let's revisit that. Because I know that was big, right?
Yeah, well, I sold a really cool concept to a bunch of great people like you and Collins and Kenyon, the president of NASGW, and then to kind of like look at this whole thing, almost, get everybody excited and then go, well, we can't just give money, and now we gotta look back. I mean, that was it was scary for me because I kind of put myself out there as well. I never in my wildest imagination would be to this point now where I'm just fielding calls from the mental health professionals, because I really wanted it to be an easy answer, and it wasn't. And I learned a lot because I was that guy too, right? Like, I believed Minority Report existed, and we could really find these things. But then we're always walking on that line of liberty as well. Like, we're into liberty, but we want to kind of like keep an eye on people. It's just a weird place to be. So I'd rather just find solutions that we can do.
And that's why I think the thing like, again, proactive mental health. I've said it a million times, through this endeavor, it is ridiculous that I can get dental cleanings twice a year, right? Mm-hmm. And next year when I turn 50, I can get a colonoscopy every year or whatever, like, because the physical health community realizes that by having my teeth cleaned under my insurance twice a year, I'm going to avoid these massive problems and potential other health things that come from bad dental health and the cost and the missing work and how it impacts our community. So health insurance, dental insurance covers proactive dental here. Screenings for cancer. If I have a family history, then it starts at 45. I don't have a family history, it starts at 50 for colon cancer or whatever your thing is. Like mammograms, all that stuff, right? Like, the reason we do that is proactive.
Right.
But we have zero coverage under any healthcare plan. Now, your company may, if you're a big tech company, they may give you money for proactive stuff, but no major healthcare program comes with proactive mental health care. Boggles my mind.
Right. It's something that Jake Wiskirchen always says, who's a board member, and especially at Kevin's, he was really making a point of this, is that you have to have a diagnosis first before they can even treat you the insurance, which is ridiculous, right?
It's like, I don't have to have a cavity to get my teeth cleaned, right? But I have to have depression in order to go see a therapist, right? Now there's a stigma. Now there's a track record. Now there's all this stuff. Like, why can't, I have this little tattoo that says breathe, just to remind me to like sometimes slow down.
Yeah.
Or I keep giving my bracelets away, but my Walk Talk America bracelet, same thing. It just that's my touchstone. That's proactive mental health care, right? Those pictures that you have up, like when you come into this office and you see them, that's proactive mental health care. And just finding simple ways you can do it on your own, that I think is so important from Walk Talk America, telling people not only that, but talking to each other. Right? And being like open and vulnerable a little bit and honest about, maybe I shouldn't be carrying guns this week. One of the things I've gotten to really be more vocal about at different times is this idea with SSRIs, right? It comes up a lot, right? Antidepressants, like, 92% of active killers, mass killers, spree shooters, whatever, have been on SSRIs at one point or another, right? And 33%, making up numbers, some significant number have been on them at one time or another, and or are on them when they commit their acts of crime and murder. So there are people in the gun community who will denigrate that, and they will talk about it, and they will rail on it, and they will do podcasts, and they will write blogs, and they will testify in hearings, and they will say it's the fault of the mental health, the pharmaceutical companies, and SSRIs. Well, if you really believe that, how can you not say to your friends who own guns, because there are millions of people on antidepressants in our country, why would you not say, if you think going on or off an SSRI, especially what they consider the transition period, is a volatile period of rage control, of suicidal inclination and all this other stuff, why would you not tell somebody who you know carries a gun every day, hey, if you're going on a new SSRI, you probably want to put the gun in the safe and just not carry the gun for a couple weeks? It boggles my mind. Like, if you're going to pound the desk and be so mad about this, do you not care about gun owners? Do you not care about do you not care about the suicide? Are you just wanting to be mad at Big Pharma? That's what I believe. Because I've been told by would-be leaders in this community, they would never say that. I'm not, because they're what? We go, oh, then the government's going to tell you can't carry a gun while you're on an SSRI. Well, I mean, I don't know that that's the case, but if there's a big sign on the backhoe that says don't operate when you're taking, Oxycontin, maybe you shouldn't be carrying a gun when you're carrying Oxycontin. But that's a choice we can make.
Right, and we got to make that choice. And
before there's legislation.
But we make that choice with everything else, right? So when we see somebody who's muzzle flashing on accident, we correct them, right? Or we're the first ones to say, hey, like, don't do that, or keep your finger off of that, or don't point the gun up that way.
Right.
It's the same thing.
It should be the same thing. Yeah. Oh, well, if you're going to go out and get drunk, don't carry a gun.
Right.
Who are you to tell me about my freedom? Okay, well, put your finger on the trigger. Rob, how can you let him put his finger on the trigger? Well, it's freedom. Right. America. Founding fathers put their finger on the trigger all the time, from what I understand.
Exactly. So there's a lot of irony, right? That we're so quick to point out and judge people that do things, which makes sense. We should do the same thing. And this is what I mean. If we do it, they won't make us do it.
That's the thing. My line is that, if we don't show responsibility, there are plenty of people out there who will legislate their version of responsibility upon us. I wanted to make this relatively tight. I thought it was important that this message got shared. Mike, I appreciate you taking the time. My daughter and your daughters are out there waiting for us to go hang out at the pool. Thank you for starting this. Thank you for pushing through this. Thank you for pushing through those moments of, well, this isn't going the way I thought, or the pivots, and leading those of us who've been involved, sincerely.
No, and I appreciate your support, and I really look forward to the next couple of years. I think it's going to be amazing. So I thank you. So.
Yeah, and what Mike doesn't do enough, and I probably don't do enough, WTTA.org. Look at the website, see what's there. If any of this made sense to you, if it resonates, throw some cash at it, because there are things that WTTA spends money on. The board has to approve everything. It goes through there, obviously. There's no jets. There's no cars. There's no fancy
suits.
stuff. There's no fancy suits.
I want the suits.
You don't want the suits. You got to go get the suits by selling Avidity Arms PD11. We'll talk about that in some other podcasts.
I just want Wayne's budget for the suits. How's that? That's fair?
We'll get that from Avidity Arms. When you buy the guns, I'm buying him suits. Thanks, man.
Yeah.